state convention. There they would elect national delegates. And presumably when they take the straw poll in the Iowa caucuses, the poll reflects the delegate selection. But nothing is binding. It's just like a big, massive poll. And indeed, you assume at a particular precinct caucus in Iowa that 10 people will write down Ron Paul or Mitt Romney or somebody else. You would presume the 10 people then in that particular precinct would then elect a delegate to go to the county convention who supports the candidate with whom they agree. But that's just an assumption. But when this massive straw poll in Iowa gets taken here in a couple of weeks, less than a couple of weeks now, Rich Lowry of National Review is saying if the folks in Iowa vote for Ron Paul, they will destroy the state, they will relinquish all relevancy that the state ever had, and they will probably jeopardize their first-in-the-nation caucus. Because Ron Paul just cannot be the nominee. He's radical. He in fact, is blaming America for 9/11, the usual things. Dorothy Rabinowitz in the Wall Street Journal today took another cheap shot at Ron Paul. He says he's busy running around the country blaming the victim. He's got Stockholm Syndrome. And now the racist charges are coming forward. One of the reasons that Pat Buchanan called in last hour is I wanted to ask Pat what happened to him in New Hampshire in 1996. And if you were listening last hour, you heard him confirm the same thing happened to him. That when Pat Buchanan upset the Republican field in 1996 in New Hampshire, there were those in the Republican establishment who would not tolerate, not countenance, Patrick J. Buchanan. He was an apostate on free trade and immigration. They didn't like his foreign policy, much like Ron Paul's. And so Patrick J. Buchanan was torpedoed. He was destroyed by the Republican hierarchy. This, speaking of Buchanan's new book, this is suicide of a political party. Because here's what these Republicans don't understand. The people that Ron Paul is bringing into the party, whether you like him or not, are not Republican Party reptiles. They have no great party allegiance. They will not, once Paul is defeated by the establishment, simply say, oh, I'm mad at those guys, but I'll just hold my nose and vote for Newt. You know, I'll be a good Republican 11. They will not. They will sit out. They will vote Libertarian. I doubt they'll vote for Obama. They'll encourage Paul to run in a third party. So the Republican Party, by engaging in this vicious attack on Ron Paul, is sowing the seeds of its own destruction in 2012, and they don't even know it. Your thoughts on this when we return.
I knew a man, Bojangles, and he danced for you in worn-out shoes, silver hair and ragged shirt and baggy pants. The old soft
So Dr. Jeff is about to light up a cigar, huh? I'm already jealous.
so high.
I'm going to have to light up my own just to have a little, a little bonding, long-distance bonding with Dr. Jeff. Enjoy that stogie, Jeff. Back here on the Jason Lewis program, let me just say something that's really got me going on this whole Ron Paul thing. I can't say I agree with Ron Paul on everything, but watching what is happening to this guy and what is about to happen is really quite amazing. The Republican Party can now forgive the Senate GOP from undercutting the Tea Party. That's okay. We still have to be good Republicans. They can forgive the Arkansas tax and spender, Mike Huckabee, when Iowans voted him the caucus winner 4 years ago. That's okay. Got to rally around the flag, boys. That's okay. Republicans can forgive the Mitt Romney flip-flops or the Newt Gingrich insanity and the Freddie and Fannie lobbying and all of the rest that Gingrich has done. That's okay. Got to rally around the flag. Got to remember the 11th commandment. But the War Party cannot forgive apostasy when it comes to interventionism abroad. What is it about Dr. Paul's positions that has the establishment so worried? He hasn't voted for tax increases. He's pro-life. Is it his plan to let states decide medicinal marijuana? Well, I thought Republicans were for states' rights. And that's, the whole legalizing drugs thing isn't going to happen anyway, and everybody knows it. I think it, frankly, ought to be discussed and ought to be turned back to the states, but that's something that libertarians have been working on and are going to continue to work on. But regardless, no, Paul's transgression, Paul's sole transgression is foreign policy. The Republican Party is now in firm control by neoconservatives and evangelicals who believe that Israel is the 51st state. Therefore, we need to be in the Middle East, and we need to go to war with Iran. We need to go to war with Pakistan. We need to go to war with 1.2 billion Muslims. Now, some of you will just say, oh, Jason, you're sounding like Dr. Paul. Are you crazy? What else, what other explanation could you possibly have for this vehemence against Paul? I'm confused here. It isn't as though he's off the reservation on any other issue. It's just foreign policy. And the irony of the smear campaign is fraught with disingenuousness because Paul doesn't just want to get out of the Middle East, so it's not an Israeli issue. He wants to get out of Okinawa. He wants to get out of South Korea. He wants to adopt a non-interventionist foreign policy with a massive, look, we got a $700 billion military. We can cut $100 billion out of that and still be the world's greatest military. So have a strong military at home. Tell anybody if they threaten us or attack us, they're going to get their comeuppance. Paul voted for, indeed, wiping out the Taliban after 9/11. But you don't need to be everywhere at once. What's the heterodoxy there? I'm confused here. Well, the only thing I can come up with is that there are those in control in the GOP whose most important issue is, I guess, eradicating Islam from the face of the earth, bombing Arab countries, and trying to ignite a war when we can't afford another one. You're blaming the victim, Lewis. You're just like Paul. You're blaming, you got Stockholm syndrome. No, nobody says we should take it easy on Al-Qaeda. Nobody's saying that. What we're saying is you cannot go from one country to one country to one country and keep invading countries, keep bombing countries, and ever have peace. And it's not going to work because all you do is turn people against you. You can't say it's okay for Pakistan to have nuclear weapons, but it's not okay for Iran. Now, maybe you want to invade both countries. But we're going to have to reinstate the draft, and we're going to have to spend $5 trillion on defense. Politics and foreign policy is the art of the possible. This you can't do. Now, I bring this up today only because you're starting to see the ugly attacks raise their ugly head on Dr. Paul. And I'm not saying you need to support him. And I'm not saying he's right on everything. And I'm not saying his supporters sometimes don't get on my nerves. They do, and your nerves. But if you want to know why Ron Paul's supporters get a little upset, take a look at the vitriol reserved for this guy, as opposed to anybody else. The GOP will forgive Romney, they'll forgive Gingrich, they'll forgive Santorum, they'll forgive Huckabee, they'll forgive the senators who undercut but they will not forgive somebody who does not want to go into Iran. What does that mean? It means that is the number one issue for the Republican Party. War. Eradicating Muslims. Well, I got news for you. I don't know if I speak for any of you, but I just speak for myself. It's not my number one issue. It's not my existential issue. We are hollowing out, as Patrick J. Buchanan said last hour on this program, we are hollowing out the American experiment right here at home. We are engaged in a welfare state that is a cancer on this country. We are redistributing wealth. We are taking away freedoms in the war on terror. And what is the point of saving Anbar province if we lose Arizona, as Gipper said? There is no point in it. And yet, the Republican Party is ready to tear itself apart over this. I will tell you, these guys have no idea the mess they're creating. And Paul, if he runs as a third-party candidate, the Republicans lose. So why would you want to alienate him and his supporters? Let me repeat that. If you alienate Paul and you continue with these attacks, He will run as a third-party candidate, and the GOP will lose. I will guarantee it. So I would suggest you send out an olive branch and debate him on the issues without resorting to the usual Al Sharpton tactics. Well, I really can't argue with Dr. Paul, so let's bring out an old newsletter because he's a racist. Let's call him a xenophobe. Let's call him an anti-Semite. Yeah, that'll work. We just got to bring this guy down. And everybody in the Republican establishment, the cable channels, talk radio, the newspapers, the party, they are all in on this smear. It's cracking up the party. And it won't be Paul. Unless you believe, as a Republican, you cannot disagree on policy, that all Republicans must think alike, and if you are not behind nuking Iran, why, you're not a good Republican. If that's going to be the party platform, the war party platform going forward, the party is short-lived anyway. How ironic on this very day that Lowry takes a below-the-belt shot at Ron Paul and Iowans, warning Iowa, do not vote for this guy, Iowa. This is going to be fascinating how Iowans take this and whether they have backbone. So Rich Lowry warns Iowans. Dorothy Rabinowitz in the Wall Street Journal says Paul is blaming the United States for 9/11. Of course, he's never done that. All the while today, what do we read? New York Times, explosions rock Baghdad amid Iraqi political crisis. 70 people killed. American officials are shocked with the speed with which conditions have deteriorated in Iraq. And the U.S. military has admitted that the Pakistani strike, well...